How many times does it seem like the story behind a headline is one of mental illness?
According to the Justice Department, more than half the inmates in jail and prisoners struggling with some sort of mental illness. Tonight, the Fox 9 investigators looking at how so many are falling through the cracks of the system. And Tom Blyden here with one particular loophole.
Yeah, guys, there are loopholes and cracks all over the system. This has to be one of the toughest issues I've ever come across. It's really just amazing. Per capita, Minnesota has the lowest number of psychiatric hospital beds in the nation. We are 50th, dead last. But the mentally ill didn't disappear. Many found a bed at the local county jail where they can be stuck for months on end and where things can go terribly wrong very quickly.
I remember having feelings that I was in hell.
The dimensions of Michael Schuler's hell went far beyond his solitary cell at the Hennepin County Jail.
Like there was demons around me telling me to break my legs and cut myself.
After 40 days locked up, the delusions, the voices became too much. He did the unthinkable, stabbing himself in the eyes with a pencil.
I couldn't take the pain anymore. You know, what I was feeling mentally.
He was standing naked in his cell in his own feces for days on end, screaming unintelligibly. That doesn't take a large leap to understand that he's in the wrong place.
Schuler was arrested 3 years ago for missing a court date while leaving HCMC's psych unit, where he was being treated for schizophrenia. His attorney says Schuler received little psychiatric care while in jail, and at one point, jailers even withheld his medication.
There was medical staff available to provide care for him, and nobody took any realistic action to protect him from hurting himself. That's ghastly. That's Middle Ages.
He's just one of thousands of mentally ill Minnesotans trapped in a revolving door of jail cells, courtrooms, and hospital ERs. Like Timothy Steele, the Farmington man who killed his grandmother with a hammer last month because he heard voices. Or Philip Quinn, shot and killed by St. Paul police in September while waiting for a bed to open up in a psych unit. Nationwide, 3 times as many seriously mentally ill people are languishing in jails or prisons than being treated in hospitals.
They should not be in the jail. It's not the best place for them. But we need a secure place to keep some people when they're accused of very violent offenses. And right now in Hennepin County, we have the jail.
Judge Carrie Meyer runs Hennepin County's Criminal Mental Health Court, where the first job is determining a person's competence.
In other words, the way I explain it to them, is it fair for you to face trial right now?
Are you mentally fit enough?
Exactly.
It's called a Rule 20 assessment, when a psychologist evaluates an inmate in the jail to see if they're competent to stand trial, whether they can assist their attorney in their own defense and understand the charges against them. If they're found incompetent to stand trial in a criminal case, they are then referred for a civil commitment. But here the standard is very different, whether the person is a danger to themselves or others. Yet many suspects who are found incompetent don't meet that civil standard. They're not sane enough to face criminal charges, but not sick enough to be civilly committed. They fall into what's known as the Rule 20 gap.
It's a much, much higher standard.
Yes.
So there are people caught between these two legal standards, aren't there?
Yes, the gap.
Judge Meyer began tracking those cases on a spreadsheet. She found of the 119 suspects found incompetent to face criminal charges last year, less than half would go on to be civilly committed as mentally ill and dangerous. The majority, 62 cases, didn't meet that standard, falling into the Rule 20 gap, spending an average of 93 days locked up before they were released from jail, the vast majority without ever receiving treatment.
So these people are truly kind of falling through the cracks. You can't keep them, and it doesn't seem like they're being connected with social services that allow them to restore their competence.
Right, they're not agreeing to social services. It's being offered, but they're not accepting the services and certainly not seeing improvement.
But if you're thinking this is one of those issues that we only see in the metro, think again. It's even worse in the rural areas, which is why today we're going out to Bemidji, where in the Beltrami County Jail, they estimate as many as 70% of their inmates are struggling with mental illness.
The county jails have turned into the holding pen for people with mental illness.
Sheriff Phil Hodap's jail population's grown 600% since the 80s.
The one that I think is really interesting is this one. Do you currently believe that someone can control your mind by putting thoughts into your head?
Every incoming inmate now screened to see if they have mental health issues. Many are so-called frequent flyers who come through all the time.
How many people do you have in here who have an acute psychiatric issue?
Well, recently, and within the last couple of weeks, we had 8 people on special watch at one time.
And what does that mean, special
watch? It requires more frequent well-being checks and more frequent visits with our medical.
Those who fall into the Rule 20 gap here can spend 4 months or more in the jail before being released without treatment. Under a state law passed 2 years ago, those who qualify for civil commitment must be transferred to a psychiatric facility within 48 hours. But Sheriff Hodap says most get stuck on a waiting list.
For us to find a bed for someone with a mental illness, we have to drive hundreds of miles in any direction to get to a place that has adequate psychiatric care for somebody.
Trouble is, that state law, which sounded really good 2 years ago, has only led to a backlog here at the state psychiatric hospitals like Anoka Metro, the state's second largest. Not only that, the patients they are getting here tend to be more dangerous.
Consider the case of Mohammed Hussein Hassan, a sex offender with a history of assaulting staff at Anoka Metro. According to a police report, last February he attacked a worker, holding her down, licking her face, and forcing his tongue down her throat. Since the 48-hour law went into effect, nearly 500 jail inmates have been transferred to psychiatric facilities. During that same time period, staff assaults at Anoka Metro have doubled.
My life then was a black hole. My life now is a healing process, finally.
Now taking his medication, Michael Schuler is stabilized and is living in a group home. Having lost an eye, Schuler has since settled a lawsuit he filed against the jail for $1 million. Just part of the high cost of falling into the gap. Patients too dangerous for hospitals. Inmates too sick for jails.
But the question is, where do you keep them in the meantime? And to put them in the jail until we figure out where to put them is only making their illness worse.
The Hennepin County Jail has made some significant changes as a result of the Schuler case, and the county as a whole is actually way ahead of the curve on this. There are plans to create a kind of locked hospital setting, something halfway between a hospital and a jail, to triage these cases. And last year, with bipartisan support, the legislature approved $46 million in new funding for mental health services. Guys, there has been a wake-up call on this issue. It takes a while to find the right programs, and really there may be no silver bullet. It may take an array of programs to really deal with this issue.
You know, people might be wondering, where would this lockdown hospital setting be?
They're looking at locations in Hennepin County, but it's not going to be HCMC. That is not a secure facility, but they're looking for one right now.
All right.
Such a difficult issue. Thank you, Tom.